Hey guys, welcome to the Meta Podcast. My name is Louis Bellman. I'm joined by Stuart Cyn McLeod and Alex Magical Voice Wielden. We're going to talk about the world's meta today. 718 is in about a week now, so kind of late with that one. But anyway, we're finally here. You've all been waiting for us, obviously. Yeah, and we're
exactly.
and I guess we should kind of prove that we're not just three guys taking the piss. So, Cyn,
Three guys.
you're the one with the credentials, so lay them out for us.
Well, I've been a coach in the UK League. I've casted several LAN events and a few university events, including the University World Championship most recently. And I do some individual coaching as well. I'm looking into coaching some North American University League teams. Excited to see what comes with that, but that's me.
All right, and Magical Voice, do you have anything of note to say in this section?
I'm just a guy. No, I'm just kidding. So what I actually do is I do a lot.
We got him off the street.
They picked me up the street. They were just like, "Hey, you look like a guy." I'm like, "You might be right. I'm not gonna let you know just now." But anyways, so I do a lot of play-by-play casting. I've worked for Pete League. I've worked for Leon Gaming. I've worked for Gamers.com.emt. I've worked for Imperial Pro League, Upsurge, just a lot of different organizations throughout my year and I'd say like 2-month tenure of being a caster.
All right, and why do I have you on? I told you before, but why do I have you on?
You have me on because for whatever reason I get bored and I like to watch and research a lot about different regions around the world.
All right, and as for me, not that high profile, to be honest, but yeah, I was head admin of Compete League once, so that kind of has to count for something.
Something another.
I mean, don't sell yourself short, Louis. Louis is one of the guys that I actually prefer analyzing. Out of everybody who's not really got the credentials, so to speak, of being a coach for several teams, etc., he's actually a very good analyst, and it's definitely good to go over some notes with him. He always seems to have valid points to say, even when I don't have anything to say, so I definitely appreciate having him here.
And he's one of the few people that I actually can talk to about all these independent regions. Most people don't know much about them. So for me, someone who likes to do research about them, kind of watch their games, it's nice to have someone that I can always go to talk to and be like, hey, what do you think about this?
I mean, you have our respect, Louis.
All right, that has to count for something. I mean, what else can I say? I've gone to the doctor's school of analysis, which is just say something and then try to justify it later.
Hey, that sounds like what I do. That's weird.
Yeah, I do think that's kind of a good strategy in general, because you can always say, "Oh, okay, I can see your viewpoint," but just not saying anything is just boring. All right, let's actually get into this. So 718 has hit us last week. And I kind of want to start off with the jungle changes. We had the Cinderhawk nerf, 25 HP, which doesn't sound like a lot, but some of the tank junglers also got hit, as well as the Knight's Vow also lost 100 HP. So overall, tank junglers kind of struggling right now. And I kind of want to ask: is it enough to put them out? Do we see Lee Sin back? Do we see Lee surging up? Cyn, what is your...
So one thing that's interesting here is that the fact that they've done this, they've taken away the 25 HP from the Cinderhawk. It actually makes the way the typical rune page is for a Zac, going for Cinderhawk straight into Warmogs is one level earlier that you can't get it. So you have to have one extra level to be able to activate the Warmog's armor passive. Which is a little bit interesting, but I don't think it's enough to force them out right now, especially when they nerfed Elise on this patch. Lee Sin is going to be rising back up. Lee Sin's always a pick for so many strong mechanical junglers. But with Elise, one of the strongest competitive snowball junglers being taken away a little bit in terms of the volatile spiderling nerf that came through, it'll be interesting to see how much it's actually impacted. Of course, Ivern getting another load of buff as well.
Yeah, Ivern is definitely one that I want to keep an eye on because it fell off for a while, but it's something that with these changes kind of happening to the tanks where he always fit a nice slot where he was like great just supportive jungle, and with Ardent Sensor being so strong, I could actually see him coming back.
Yeah.
Magical Voice. There's Nidalee buffs on this patch as well, so...
Oh, that would be harsh for
Actually,
hard for
Nidalee has been rising up in some regions. It's actually, you know, the ridiculous clear is still kind of there that she used to have and used to dominate everything with. And the new build, we have her kind of... she has more late game staying power with the heal buff now as well. So the build that kind of came out of this one is go early, I think Runic Echo's early game, and then kind of go more supportive towards the late game. Maybe even go for the Ardent Sensor or something.
About 6 months ago, because we saw Nidalee had been falling off of the map, some people actually started to make this jungle build work, where if you snowball ahead on the early game elite, getting the Ardent Sensor and the Athenes is actually really beneficial for her, because she gets a lot of AP from it, she gets the bonus heals on other people, and what she already provided with the bonus attack speed on her E gets amplified even further, and these E-buffs will surely help her, but this is what happens every year around World. We see about 10-15 champions buffed, 10-15 champions nerfed, and they just go, okay, hopefully Worlds will be a bit balanced, because ultimately what Riot want from this event is to have as many champions played as possible, because we know those comparisons to Dota are going to come in, where people say, but this percentage of the champions in Dota were played, why isn't it the same in League? And they start to get some criticism for that, so they want to make it so as many people as possible can be played.
Yeah. All right, I kind of want to talk about Jarvan here as well. Jarvan actually, I think, got hit the most because he also lost HP. A bit of his shield in the nerfs. Also, Cinderhulk Knight's Vow kind of was his, like, one of his preferred builds, and he loses a lot of tankiness, and that also comes in for the other for some of the other junglers. So I kind of want to ask a question: will we actually see the Cinderhulk Knight's Vow still, or will we maybe see a Cinderhulk, I don't know, Aegis of the Legion Knight's Vow? Is it actually still viable to go for these two items first, and are you tanky enough still?
Do you want to start, Magical?
Yeah, I'm like, this one's an interesting one, because when you talk about Jarvan, he has that flexibility, you know, top lane, jungle, and honestly, I can almost see this pushing him out of the jungle. We already talked about Ivern, we talked about Lucian, Nidalee. Elise, I'm sure she got nerfed, but she's still kind of around. The Cinderhulk's going to make tanks a little bit less viable. But Jarvan, he's getting a lot here. He's losing a lot of potential when it comes to trying to be that tank initiation frontline. So I can almost see this pushing him into just the top lane and trying to see him go for more of that bruiser build.
So what I see is quite the opposite. I see he's going to stick in the jungle, but the fact that the Knight's Vow, they've lost 100 health, and they've removed the 100 gold cost in response of it. It does mean that it's a little bit of a nerf, obviously. Efficiency a little bit lower now. But the fact that the Knight's Vow, when you activate that to a DPS down, you get more than an effective 100 health back. You get quite a few 100 health back, effectively, in a team fight. And the idea that you're not quite tanky enough is one that's interesting. Because although you may not have the maximum health stat, it gives you so much sustain, giving you an effective health pool much larger than the one that it seems when somebody fights you.
Is that also kind of a sentiment we have for like all tank junglers who went that route, or is it just the Jarvan?
I think it's everybody, because
I was about to say
the mid laner. For somebody who's got consistent DPS, like you can put it on a Cassiopeia, or generally you'll see it put it on the ADC. Whoever's got that consistent DPS to put down to consistently heal you.
Well, this is where I just want to mention, this is where we see that tendency, kind of how Cyn said. If you look at past years, sure, there's nerf buffs that come out right around World, but for the first few weeks, no one's going to truly adapt to the meta right away. They're still going to play what they felt was strong on 7.17. They're going to go for what was, so probably still have the tank Jarvans, have the Cho'Gaths, the Maokais, or really transitioning possibly to the Iverns, to the Nidalees, try to go for something that can get that Ardent Sensor. Maybe even the Lulu, we saw that come out, and it actually worked really well.
So we've got to look famously at last year's Worlds meta, about how the supports coming in. We said it was going to be like, okay, it's going to be these mage supports. We're seeing Karma, Lulu, pretty much all of those sorts of champions. We still saw a little bit of Alistair starting to die off. And then Zyra being such a strong pick around that point as well in the support role, coming off of the LCK playoffs where she was really picked up heavily by those players. And the meta adapted so quickly to the point where Miss Fortune was played in one game in the quarterfinals, then suddenly every single support in who was left in the World Championships had to learn Misfortune support or they were going to lose games. And I found that so incredible because it just shows how quickly metas can adapt and how quickly somebody can find a pick that maybe wasn't OP and force it to be OP. And there's players like Gorilla who I'm interested to see if he can do that again this year. Pioneered the brand support, the Zyra support, and the Misfortune support all by himself.
Ooh, well, I'd say Lacrit kind of had the brand.
No. He showed up on it during that year. It was the previous year.
Ah, fair. That's a fair point. That's a fair point.
Yeah. So we kind of transitioned into support. I quickly wanted to go back to the jungle because we have 2 picks that we really didn't talk about. Quickly, Magical, you already talked about it, the Lulu. Is it legit or is it kind of more like Spirit really wanted to play that once?
I'm going to say that it is a actual fringe meta. That is something that we could possibly see. I think it's going to be in the same category as Ivern, where Ivern should not be picked right away. It should be 100% dependent on what your opponent picks in order to pick that yourself. But it is a huge possibility that we do see it, but we shouldn't see it until the second rotation at the earliest.
All right, and lastly, the big fat small guy in the room, which is Ezreal jungle. I've heard opinions ranging from it's just Koreans really want to play really want to play Ezreal again, or is it
regardless of its ADC win rate?
Yeah. But towards the other end, it's like, he's top tier. So Cyn, where does he fit?
I think he comes down kind of on the sort of side of top tier, but only really in solo queue. Because he essentially ends up playing like a more aggressive version of Graves, a less defensively statted one where you don't get the true grip passive. Still based around going aggressive, landing that Q with red buff, slowing and sticking to people, using your E aggressively as well to stick to the... It's fully reliant on how much you can do in terms of the early game. If you don't get snowballing ahead, you don't get 1 or 2 kills early on, you don't start to siege up that first tower. He starts to fall off dramatically because generally opposing junglers will get too tanky, he won't be able to force them out anymore, and he doesn't have the damage really to do much left in the game.
All right, since we're talking about the World Championship, you said solo queue. Will we see it at Worlds? And if we see it, in what kind of scenario?
Gigabyte Marines.
Yeah, Gigabyte Marines. I mean, they're gonna bust out.
I think I'm pretty sure they're gonna bust this out. Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't be too surprised. I also wouldn't be too surprised to see this come out in the play-ins. But once we start getting to the groups, you shouldn't see this outside of Gigabyte Marines. And you'll probably see it come out in the play-ins from teams that are either well ahead of their opponents and they feel that they can style on the lower class, or you'll just see a team that's desperate. They're already kicked out. They're like, yeah, might as well.
All right. And lastly, we have seen some nerfs to the actual big fat guy coming out. Gragas kind of is actually he kind of thinned down. That's kind of the gist of it.
He went on a diet. That's what it was.
So will that help him? Will it make him?
It's people like you, Louis, fat who pressure him into doing that. He's lost weight.
He's beautiful the way he is. This is why there's a Guardian skin more than Ezreal.
Thank you. I really needed that.
But it's just a small collision radius change for him is going to mean that it's a little bit harder to land that E and go in with the ultimate. So the flash E may be going to be whiffed by a couple people. We've seen changes like this come through before. There was a slimming change in terms of they thinned the hitbox rather than making the hitbox around him smaller. And that really impacted a lot of junglers because suddenly they were struggling to make those big plays with the flash E. And we'll see how long it will take people to adapt. The similar changes came through to Alistar last year, and a lot of people would mess up engages on that as well.
Mm-hmm. What I kind of think is even bigger though is not just the width of it, but the end hitbox. Like we often saw like multi-man flash body slams. I think that that might be much less viable now. to go for the multi-mans and rather maybe go for one target that you really want to engage upon.
So that's still 360 units across, which is just 3.5 Teemos wide. So 100 units is a Teemo. That's the way you should always end up visualizing. 3.5 Teemos wide. Think of that on the map. That's how wide Gragas's E is.
Mm-hmm.
So when you think about that, yeah, there's still going to be multi-man E's. It's of, can you get those people close enough together to be able to consistently do it? There's another one where it's, I love seeing it. It's like you see a stun land onto 2 people at once. So Gragas walks up right next to them to make sure he gets the stun on both of them with the E.
Mm-hmm. All right. Anything I forgot in the jungle? I'm pretty sure I did.
I really don't.
I'm pretty sure I didn't.
Think so. Yeah,
so
I'm pretty sure you're good.
These jungle changes will have a lot of an impact. Well, the worldwide meta kind of was a team fighting meta. I think we can agree on that, right? Like maybe not the upper echelons of the LCK meta, but the global meta in most leagues was a team fighting meta. Can we agree on that?
Yes.
So with the changes to the jungle, having maybe Sejuani not be as prevalent, Gragas not as prevalent, are we still going to see a team fighting meta, or are we going to more of a pick style?
The thing we got to think about this though is what the team fight meta actually means. Is remember back in season 5, spring, it was a team fight meta. The only 2 junglers were Sejuani and Gragas, and a little bit of Rek'Sai as well, of course. But it was all about team fighting consistently over and over again, getting these really scrappy fights. And who won that event? It was China, because Korea didn't get to execute on macro. Macro wasn't really existing. It was all about stomping your opponents in team fights, and China excels at that. Mm-hmm. So if we can see another meta like that, forced in by, I assume, RNG, EDG, and potentially Team WE as well, then it's really going to be hard for other teams to stop it.
And I think this is going back to the point that I made earlier, where I talked about how teams are less likely to adapt to the change in the metas right away. We're not going to see them try to go for something too different because they want to go with what they've been practicing for the past month and a half plus. They want to go with what they're comfortable with. They don't want to have to adapt on the fly. Only teams that are trying to maybe shake things up. Maybe we see Gigabyte Marines being one of the teams. Maybe we see China being the teams that are trying to shake things up and really put those on edge.
Actually,
of course, we've got the playing stage for them to be able to feel out the meta as well.
True.
Okay, that's actually what I wanted to bring up. Do you think we will see this shift that we have seen towards quarterfinals to semifinals at Worlds coming much earlier this time around? Because we have 2 stages of the play-in stage, the group stage and the bracket stage, and after that only we have the true Worlds tournament. That's 2.5 weeks of preparation time to adapt to the new patch. So, and there will be a bunch of scrims during that time. So, will we see this adaptation in the group stage already?
We'll probably see it when it comes to the actual group stage, and when it's the play-ins, you're gonna see a clear division. You're gonna see the teams that want to keep playing to what helped them get to Worlds, and you're gonna see the teams that have made it to Worlds, and now they're like, we can change, we know we can adapt, we can put the pressure on, and that's where you're gonna be having these definitive lines from 2 teams, whether or not it's going to be the trend to go for what was once strong and the trend for what is now strong.
So when you think about what was really strong around the Worlds qualifiers last year, it wasn't done at the World Championships a couple of weeks beforehand, and we saw that Albus Nox Luna coming into that played Brand every single game pretty much.
Yep.
And Brand became 100% pick ban during that tournament. Shortly after that tournament, when Worlds started, Brand was played in 1 game in the entire tournament.
Yep.
Maybe 2, maybe I'm forgetting one.
I think it was banned any time against Albus Nox, and they got it 1.
I don't think it was necessarily banned every game, because I don't remember H2K banning it.
No, I think by then they had given up on it, and they didn't actually pick up. But before
they found
then,
a really nice game against, I can't remember if it was CLG or G2, where they legitimately outplayed them by using these just pocket picks and comfort picks. And we could see those come through in the play-in stage where people create these pocket picks. And they become, oh, that guy's pocket pick seems to be working really well for him. We should try it. And what I want to actually speak to you, I want to ask, I'm sorry to step on your toes, Louis, but I want to ask both of you a question. We've seen in the past few years, I think in every year, in fact, there's been 100% pick ban champion at the World Championships. Last year it was Nidalee. Year before it was Gangplank and Mordekaiser.
Mm-hmm.
Year before that, I believe it was Alistair.
Yeah.
And I think it was actually even Corki the year before, a couple of years before that. And
Yes.
every single year, pretty much.
I guess the question you're working towards is who's it gonna be, and it's gonna be Fiora, definitely.
Ooh. Whoa, Fiora. That's an interesting.
Throw in the fire here. I'm interested. What are your thoughts on the changes? She was actually buffed on this.
Yeah, she got buffed. She got her movement speed back, which kind of was the thing that that kind of forced her out of the competitive meta before. She was super strong before. We have tank top laners coming now, and otherwise we have dueling top laners for the 1-3-1 style. We don't really have things that really beat her up, and I think she's gonna come out super strong during that next meta. And honestly, I do think that that at least in the upper echelons, that's gonna kind of put us into a split pushing meta for this
that seems
for this tournament.
Louis. You threw me for a loop on that one, but I have to actually agree with you here that it is such a strong pick. I'm currently hesitant on 100% pick ban, but maybe it could come to that after we see what the team picked up scrims. The main pick that was a counter to Fiora before was Kennen ADC top lane. And that's dead now.
Yep.
So with that gone, really, you've got to look at what's left. There's Renekton, who is still a strong pick, can still beat Fiora, but Fiora can obviously win that matchup if she's ganked early and is able to be helped out. Maybe can get snowballing ahead because she can completely roll through Renekton by that point. You got Na, who can maybe try and build Frozen Distant.
I guess the only person
you got to think about like Singe.
I guess the only person you can really think of is like Shen. I guess is still kind of decent.
It's the true damage because he's a tank. That's the problem, though, isn't it? It seems really.
It's just you kind of have the out of like, hey, I have this like field where you can't attack me.
It's the thing with Fiora though is when Fiora was one of the things that you always saw was Renekton. You just kill her top lane. With Elise being back, so to speak, we're not so sure if she's going to be forced out or not. We've seen competitive teams seem to put a priority on her. That top duo is still going to dive her over and over again and ruin her day, ruin her game. So there's definitely chances to punish a Fiora. It's inherently within the balance of the champion. But I understand your point and how strong she can be when going unchecked.
See, and this is where I look at it, and with a lot of these nerfs coming in, there were champions I was going to expect, like Rakan, where I would had he not been nerfed just now, I would have honestly expected him to be 100% pick ban because how strong of an initiator he is. But with these nerfs that have come in, that has fallen down, and honestly, a lot of champions he got hit pretty well, but not enough to make it so that they're going to be completely out. I think we're going to see a lot of the same, but I do think the Fiora will start coming up, but it's going to be a niche pick.
Do you think that
75% pick ban?
Yeah, like I actually don't think he got hit that much. Like he got a little bit of his range got it, and that's
and that's going to make it so it's a little bit clunky to play at first, and you're going to tell the difference between a really good Rakan player, really bad Rakan player. It's kind of like when Caitlyn got hit pretty hard.
Oh
yeah, and
there's still the people who played her because they were comfortable with them, but then there were the people who only played her because she was strong. You could tell the difference.
Also, like you already saw it with Rakan that he really needed to be played by somebody who knew what he was doing because unlike, for example, Alistar, who's kind of the low risk, lower reward version of Rakan. If you jump in and you don't lock enough people down, they're gonna burst you down so quick because you don't have the unbreakable wool. You're not going for tank items. You're going for ardent sensor, and you're super squishy at that stage. So you really have to be careful.
So with the Alistar, I can understand what you're saying. It's a much more tanky and reliable pick in terms of he won't just die. He won't just be caught out and lose instantly because of it. And he has enough CC within his kit to be able to nearly fall down and then keep going. But with Rakan, he has higher highs than Alistar.
Yeah.
He can land those 5-man ultimates more consistently than Alistar can. And be able to carry games almost solo if you let him. And if he whiffs his ultimate, whiffs the W with it, he's done in a team fight, unlike Alistar. But if he does land it, which he normally does, It's a case where I'd actually consider him superior to Alistair in that scenario. It's a case of what do you value consistency where you can make mistakes and not be punished, or consistency where you are going to get catch more people out.
All right, so we kind of segued into the support discussion right now, which is not really a support discussion. It's a bottom lane discussion, because we always have to kind of pair AD carries and supports to some extent, especially with Kalista being as pertinent as she is. So I kind of feel like with Kalista, Alistar is better. Without Kalista, Rakan is at least has higher highs. Like, Kalista can set up Alistar so good.
The thing that I've got a question with the ADC role, especially here, is jungle's a real big question mark. We can see so many interesting picks come out in the jungle. In fact, Sven Skaren last year got an MVP in a game on Skarner, and 2 people played Skarner during the World Championship. They both won on Skarner, and it was never played outside of those 2 games in the group stage by Jankos and Sven Skaren.
Yeah, that was kind of weird.
There's these really interesting picks like that we didn't see coming at all. In ADC, I don't expect that whatsoever. There are basically maybe 5 picks, and I'm going to name them all off to you right here. Xayah, Kalista, Tristana, Twitch, Kog'Maw.
Yeah. What about
and
Ashe?
That's pretty much it.
Only if they're banned coming in from the other.
Only if there's a lot of bans will you see Ashe come through.
I actually don't think that is quite the case. I already alluded to the fact that I think that we will kind of go into a 1-3-1 style meta, and in these cases you need a solid 3-man core of jungle support and an AD carry.
But all the junglers are solid tanky engagers right now.
Yeah.
Or disengagers like Ragus, who has that hybrid disengage and engage. You've got supports like Janna and Lulu, who are excellent tempo controllers. The 3-man unit's pretty safe regardless. And then you've got things like Kalista and Xayah, who are also inherently safe. Yeah. That 3-man unit will always be fine.
I just feel like if you go for a more aggressive jungler, like early aggressive jungler, in that case, Ashe becomes a really solid backbone for this 3-man core. So I do feel like
Lucian again then.
Yeah.
I feel like Ashe is gonna have certain compositions in which she is probably the best AD carry to pick into.
I could definitely see that being the case. It's just a case of with the way the meta is, it's going to be tank junglers and maybe carry junglers. If those carry junglers do come through, I can understand maybe seeing an Ashe or a Varus in the ADC, something more utility-based, or even a Jhin, but I can't really see it the way the meta is. It has to change up quite drastically for Ashe to be a high-priority pick.
Right, and I will also add this on. Even if we do see the jungle shifting towards carry, we have to remember there's still mid laners like Galio who provide great initiation potential, and that's a great tank frontline right there, where you can pair that up. You don't necessarily need the Ashe to be the one to bring it up. You can be like, hey, we still want the Kog'Maw, we still want the Twitch for the late game, and we're just going to use the Galio. He's not going to be doing that much damage anyways, just be the frontline while we have the Nidalee doing the AP damage for it.
So it's not actually been, I want to contest you a little bit here, Louis. So it's not actually been the 1-3-1 that we've been seeing in the meta all that often. It's been because of all these tanky engage picks, the 4-1. So you have somebody like a Shen or a Gnar or whoever you need in the side lane going 1v1 against the opponent, and then you've got the 4-man unit, which normally has a tanky engager and 2 DPSs and somebody with disengage. So like
which doesn't have to be
Sejuani, Kalista, Janna, and Syndra. That's a perfect example of what the meta is right now.
And you sometimes even have like disengage and damage on the same champion. Orianna for me is still one of the most stabilizing picks in League of Legends. If you think your comp is volatile, if you think your comp is engageable, just put an Orianna in there, and I think that's why we will see her be picked until eternity, unless like. First of all, she has good team fighting with her ultimate. She has and it's like a lot of people always say wombo combos don't work. Wombo combos don't work. Oh, aggressive wombo combos don't work. I agree with you on that one. But defensive wombo combos do work because people funnel in onto you. That's why we see picks like Anivia, picks like Orianna, picks like Syndra thrive over and over again in the meta. Navia maybe not now, but she did.
And so when we look at that, when we look at all those picks that you just mentioned, and like especially the Orianna, we got to think about. I love Orianna for one reason. She has been across the history of League of Legends probably the most balanced champion, and how the fact that she has never really been, oh my god, you can't pick her whatsoever, and she's never been, oh my god, ridiculously overpowered, you have the game. It's just always been serviceable, not really countering many matchups, but not really being countered by many matchups either. Lucian being the first time I've ever seen a matchup where Orianna is considered countered. Yes. And now Lucian's been nerfed, so his E has got a 4-second longer cooldown at rank 1. It's going to take a long time for him to be able to consider dodge out Orianna's engage potential.
Yeah. And, like, Orianna is just a stabilizing force, not only for her own team comp, but for League of Legends in general. So, great work, Riot. Thank you. All right. Continuing on, we already started to talk about the mid lane a bit. We had seen, like, very different metas across the world. Like, we have seen mostly double AD carry in China. I will count Cassiopeia as an AD carry in this.
Effectively sustained damage in there.
Yeah.
While, for example, in Korea, we had much more the Orianna. We have the Cassiopeia, though less as a damage shield, but more because of the petrifying gaze being kind of having the same effect as the shockwave to hold people's engages. And, like, first of all, the question is, what was actually the right thing to do? Because you can't always say Korea is right, because Korea has been wrong on things before. So, what was actually the real meta? Let's put it like that.
Louis, Korea's always right, and it's going to be.
Well, I mean, they win.
Here. But the thing is, if we see that heavy team fight meta come out, then we can't see picks like Xiaohu's Zed coming out.
No. Sadly.
Those picks aren't going to stick around for long. We've got to
not going to see any Talons.
I think we're going to see... Oh, God. Talon. That would be an interesting
one. Oh, I know, right?
But, like, Talon Echo would be interesting if the 1-3-1 meta was the thing. But what I'm expecting to see is just purely control mages over and over again, which means that Bjergsen's going to be pretty happy. And that means TSM's going to be pretty happy in general because they rely on him as a control mage player. So when we're seeing things like Talia coming through, I'm excited to see if that's going to be the staple pick at this World Championship in the mid lane.
All right, so that kind of pushes out the more damage-focused mid laners, like the Corki, the Lucian. I mean, the Lucian really...
Well, Corki's still going to be fine. He's still effectively plays as a control mage.
Yeah.
I
mean, how do you play Corki as a control mage? Can you explain that?
You use your abilities. You hold onto your abilities as zone control, and you can effectively play burst when you need to. But he has the package that he seems to use, like the Talia ultimate.
Yep.
And I mean, he ends up playing very similar to the Talia in that sense. He's a consistent teamfight DPS that can keep people out of an area.
I still feel like Corki is much more aggressive, much more forward, and especially doesn't have real peeling force. So
it comes down to play style.
All right. So another pick, I guess not really on the chopping block, but I'm still gonna ask Leblanc. Alex?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Yeah, sorry, you cut. Sorry,
sorry, LeBlanc.
Okay, LeBlanc. Well, LeBlanc does play like a control mage. She's not the assassin she once was. She still can burst people down, but she's not the assassin she used to be, where the heyday of the moment she shows up, an AD carry had to piss their pants because they're going to get blown up.
Syndra now.
She plays like Syndra, so she's going to be able to push the wave, try to go for a roam. I saw a game the other day where it was they used the Mimic in the bot lane, but she went and ganked top lane, so it was the mind games into the opponent. And it can work, but at the same time, she kind of got nerfed a while ago where she doesn't have the best wave clearing compared to Corki, Talia, Syndra, Victor, Cassiopeia. She just doesn't
Those are the
clear
picks
as
we're expecting to see.
exactly. So she doesn't clear as well as they do. So say very
She's got a
unlikely.
decent matchup into Orianna, so I could especially. And what she wants to do is lock down an opposing mid laner who's fairly just be able to dodge out their abilities with a W, and then be able to use those 2 chains, keep the enemy in place. And once we see her get towards these later game stages, because she's got the Gunblade, she is a burst mage. She plays like a more mobile version of Syndra, where she just wants to do a full combo and get out. But she plays like a more difficult and balanced version of Syndra. You actually have to land your abilities to do damage.
What, you're saying you don't have to land your abilities with Syndra? Come on, man, pushing on.
Look, the fact that you get benefited from not landing your abilities on Syndra because you're like, oh, the ball's still on the ground, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, like it's kind of funny. When Syndra came up as a support, it was really like just throw your ultimate on the Renekton, who's gonna take no damage, and then get these ridiculous 5-man scan of the weeks.
Yeah. Just get all the balls on the ground to be able to. That was the interesting thing.
So LeBlanc kind of. I kind of feel like she got the same treatment that Ari got, but later, where she went from being a burst mage to a more controlled style mage. So the question then becomes, why do we see LeBlanc and why don't we see Ari, Cyn?
I'm busy here crying over DFG. Ari.
The pain.
Her ultimate's on so much of a longer cooldown. Key parts are engaged to be able to get in and get back out that much more easily because she is not a mobile champion unless she has that available. With the really Hub build going for Gunblade for a while as well, we saw her a little bit in the mid lane. That was the only time we saw her this entire year, was her being played with Hextech Gunblade going to the side lane and doing exactly what LeBlanc did. They nerfed the Gunblade active, suddenly we stopped seeing Ari around. So it relies on the fact that LeBlanc has more consistent burst damage. Ari's is very much more conditional. You've got to be in very much close range. You've got to be willing to put your life at risk almost every single time. And she doesn't have the best laning matchup into most of the laners that we have been.
So we have been talking a lot about, the late game. We've been talking about, the ultimate win conditions of the game. We have been talking about pick comps and whatever. Let's talk about the early game a bit more, because I kind of feel like with some of the changes coming out, we will see a lot more early game priority coming down. So will we need to see more early game focused champions to kind of survive? Let me put it like that. Magical.
Well, this harkens back to what we were talking about earlier. The change in the meta, how there are those that try to hold to the old guard and those that try to adapt and change. Where if we see teams that play the new style and they do really well, that's when we're going to start seeing a lot more in this early game. We're going to start seeing a lot more of these aggressive early jungles. But if we don't, if we see that that actually isn't effective, teams aren't able to play that well, I honestly think that there is a potential for it to remain how it was before, but it really is dependent on how the play-ins play and how the two teams decide to square up.
What we got to think about in terms of the fact that people drafting more towards the early game, late game, mid game, it's dependent on team for one, because you can talk about people like RNG, who they draft Lucian mid inherently early game.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a very early game champion that we see quite often from them. We see, you look at G2, they always draft for the late game. Every single game. And they always go, we will outplay you in late game 5v5 team. And so it's as we say, very dependent on teams, but meta as a whole right now, it's very much mid-game team fights. Around sort of level 9, level 10, where you got Gragas, Sejuani, you got like the likes of Kalista, Rakan, Alistair. It's all based around landing those big CC combos and snowballing a game from a small advantage into a huge one very quickly.
All right. So I kind of run out of things to talk about now. Actually, we have alluded to the top lane before, but we haven't really talked about the top lane before, and that's kind of I think the most divisive topic during this entire thing, because it's like we have these three styles of top lane. We have the like carry style top laners. We have the Fiora, the Jax, the Jace. Then we have like
just Khan.
and we have
Just Khan in the top
the
lane.
the bruises. Like one thing I have to say about the West especially is whenever bruisers are like even slightly viable, everybody's like, I want to play a bruiser, I want to play Aurelia, I want to play Jarvan, I want to play Kled.
You're forgetting about the boy Urgod. Come on, what about
the tanks, guys? Please. That's literally what's going on in the comms. I don't want to play a tank. Give me something that can do damage, please. Give me something where I might be able to carry the game. And it's consistently, that's why you see things like Kled and Jarvan, who become effectively these tanky engagers, but also can carry a game from their own. And I do expect to see Kled 1 or 2 games. I don't expect it to be a highly contested pick. But what I do expect to see is Jarvan quite a lot. And we might see Maokai come through. There's going to be definitely a lot of tanks and some of the more brewery champions. But when we look towards the full carries, like the Jace, Fiora, or I hope we see more of them. And a full carry top meta is always the most exciting to watch. And you see mid lane carry metas, they always end up playing so safe and so scared. You look back when you watch matchups like Zed versus all those crazy Season 3 matchups. It was all everybody in your face permanently trying to get solo kills. It adapted to people playing a lot more safe, not wanting to give over advantage and get the snowball rolling. But when you look towards the top lane, even today, you still see that. When one person starts getting rolling, you can see the other top laner go 0-10, and they're left on an island. No one's going to help them. They just go 0-10 and lose the game for their team.
Yeah.
Look back at Season 5 World Championship, Smeb versus Huni. Matchups like that were the absolute staple of that World Championship, and they were a joy to watch. And I'm hoping we see another meta.
See, for me, we're looking at pretty much a teeter-totter of where things can go, because obviously we haven't really got to see professional play for quite some time now, so we kind of have to hypothesize all of this and just kind of see, hey, these got buffed, we think this is strong. We can even look at the amateur scene for some ideas. It's still solo queue-esque in that regards, but it's really going to be dependent on what the teams at Worlds are favoring, what they want to play, because maybe they want to play those solo carries, maybe they want to, but maybe it's too risky, like Cyn said. Maybe it's not a strat that they want to go for because they're afraid that if they fall behind, they're going to lose the game for the entirety. But we do have some really aggressive top laners here. We have Huni, we have Khan, two right there, just Juve. We got Juve, and even looking just lower, we have... well, yeah, that's Alfari, but this is just looking at the plans. We have Monterrey, we have Impact, there's just a lot of names where they're just heavy, like, I want to carry style gameplay in the top lane. So if you're looking at the pool of players coming to this Worlds, it most likely looks like it's going to be that kind of snowball-esque style.
Yeah, and what I kind of think also helps with that is we see Elise kind of falling to the wayside. We have tank junglers nerfed so that they have less health. And meanwhile, we have things like Lucian coming out, and that really hinders dive potential early on. So we kind of will have these top lane champions who are not that great in the early game, like the Fiora, being able to Jax, who will be able to kind of sit in lane for longer without absolutely getting smashed by the rest of the map.
What are those two champions good into? Tanks. And that's it's essentially, you look at the typical video game scenario, the triangle. One beats the other.
Yeah.
And it goes all the way around. It's generally bruisers lose to tanks, tanks lose to carries lose to bruisers. It's just always been the case all throughout. And although some of them are a little bit more arguable, fringe cases, some can go the other way. It's just a case of everybody always loses in certain matchups. And you can't just say, if somebody locks in this, and the other person locks in this, because they're always thinking in context. Like, you see a Fiora first pick? No, you won't see a Fiora first pick.
No.
There are plenty of counter matchups there. There's plenty of good matchups. You've got to think about, when is that going to be picked? How do they set up for the pick? What do they ban to be able to consistently go, okay, we can happily pick Fiora now? And it's going to be a very interesting situation to see how people adapt to other people's picks and how it continues from.
All right. So kind of another triangle that we have is poke beats team fight, team fight beats pick, pick beats poke. So you haven't seen poke in a while now. So question is, like, due to the tank meta, we really didn't have a lot of poke coming out because you could just stand as a Cho'Gath with like 6,000 health in front of your carry and could just say, okay, no poke today. So
Do you remember when lethality became strong though? Well, the whole meta was it was an incredibly, and then people started coming with Varus and Jhin. Jhin less so here. The whole point was Varus was ridiculously strong in that meta because you didn't care about hitting the tank. You cared about hitting the guy standing behind him. Your Q goes right through the tank, into the enemy AD carry, chunks half the HP away. You could just ignore the tanks in that meta, and then they nerfed lethality, the meta started changing. But basically, tanks have been strong all year long this year. Since the start of the year, this is the longest tank meta we've ever had.
Yes.
But yet, they've still not been nerfed. It's just a case of other things have become stronger and weaker to counter them.
Mm-hmm. So, question is, can we see a poke style work at Worlds?
Honestly, I don't think so. I'll be honest.
Has been nerfed heavily as well.
Varus has been nerfed. Jhin is pretty much. I've talked to several challenger AD honestly say that if you pick Jhin, you're trolling. That's literally what they say because that's how bad they think Jhin is in the current meta. The only possible way you could see poke is coming in from Jace, and even then, you're not picking him for the poke. You're picking him for the early game dominance.
And the split push later if you get snowballing. So
he can take a tower faster than most other top laners in the game. Isn't that hypercharged W
But
would
what-
actually do more than an auto attacks damage and
But-
get those 4 massively hypercharged, overcharged attacks.
But
So
what
just
about
fucking
that
tower.
Tristana top lane though?
Hell no! Get
Ah!
that out of here. Next, you're gonna
The
tell me
dreams!
Ziggs top lane.
My dreams! Come on, man. You can't deny me. Actually, Ziggs is a pick that we could see, I'd say, in the mid lane, but I wouldn't say you picking him. You're not picking him for the poke at that point. You're picking him for the zone control, and
Your
that's a whole
dreams for
other...
those teams are just memes.
Yeah, I know they are.
It's just
I know they are. That's why I'm like, I could see it, but it's not gonna happen.
all right. I kind of don't think we forgot anything, but did we forget anything?
Who's your pick to win Worlds?
Oh yeah, we gotta go over this.
Wait, this is a meta
Just-
podcast. Get out
Yeah,
with
just
your
go-
actual game
No.
bullshit.
Give me that long shoe. Give me that.
Yeah,
SKT.
it's gonna be
Long
for me,
shoe.
like, okay, I will be the first guy who says don't bet against SKT, but I'm gonna say it's Longzhu. It has to be Longzhu.
All right,
The meta favors
The
them.
prophecy has come.
They actually have a stylistically good matchup against SKT, and
The prodigal children
like-
arrived.
I say, okay, don't bet against SKT, but don't hype SKT to the ends of the earth and say,
All right, guys, you
SKT
ready
is
for
gonna
it?
win again. Like, no.
No.
Longzhu
You ready
has to
for a
be
meme?
has to be the reasonable pick for this World Championship.
I might drop a bomb on you guys right now.
Yeah, goodbye,
You ready?
Marines.
No way.
Rampage coming in from the plane.
Hey, this guy over here. No, nah, man, I don't give up on things, and neither will my team Royal never give up. We're gonna go all the way. Let's go.
He's
Come on.
finally gonna win something, guys.
Well, okay, I will argue this, that we've been talking a lot about the meta and how it favors certain teams, how they play. You really have to look at how this possibly could benefit either SKT, Longzhu. Longzhu, I'd say, probably one of the most heavily benefits from the change. Maybe not so much for Cuz, and he's
Yeah.
going to be a lot of question marks for me when it comes to Longzhu's success, because he tends to play a lot more of those tanks. He tries to set up the team, so it's going to be a little bit harder for me to say, hey, Longzhu's going to be out for sure. They're going to win. But if you look at a team such as Royal Never Give Up, they have a pretty good style where they try to go really hard, but they can also play towards that mid to late game. They don't necessarily have to win early. They don't have to win these team fights. They can out macro.
Yeah, and
So the thing I would contest you with them, Magical, is the fact that Last year, I was the biggest critic of Korea. I watched all of the playoffs, every build-up in terms of the regional finals and everything. Korea looked like the biggest clown fiesta that I'd ever seen.
This is true.
It was all scrappy team fights. Every single series went to Game 5, and it was down to things like a 2 HP Baron steal in the final game of LCK, and KT losing to Samsung barely in a massive
Well, okay,
clown fiesta.
that was the script, dude. That was the script.
Yeah.
Of course, KT has to lose.
The whole thing is, I came into that World Championship saying, I think Royal Never Give Up has a shot. I think Royal Never Give Up and EDG have a shot of taking a few games off of the Korean teams, making it further. I predicted RNG, even after the group stage, to have a shot against SKT. And no.
Yeah.
No.
I know, it's a dream. It's a pipe dream.
You
but
never bet against the Koreans. 'Cause
I know,
thought- even last year, they improved so much. It's the hyperbolic time chamber effect, where they lock themselves away in their room for a few weeks and come out a stronger person for it.
So I want to give a bit of, I want to give 2 points in favor of Royal Never Give Up, not towards winning Worlds, but towards China actually being the second best region in the world at this tournament. So number one is we actually see
Rift Rivals, baby.
No. That actually the consequence of Rift Rivals is what's important, because after at Rift Rivals it started that China actually started to coordinate, and they actually do full everybody was working towards these the top Chinese teams to actually be actually good now. They're doing a really good boot camp. That's one thing. And the second thing is, and this has always been true, but China sometimes just doesn't work that way. Except for there's 2, 3, maybe 4 teams in the world that have good enough macro to consistently avoid team fighting with Chinese teams. That's why China, even though they had bad Worlds tournaments, is still the second best region in League of Legends history, I would have to say. So
historically, I definitely agree with you.
Yeah.
But you got to look at the biggest enemy of the Chinese teams of all time, and it's themselves.
And LMS.
For a long time, we have seen we just did not see the Western teams, Taiwan. They never really got to the point where they can avoid fights. They always get drawn into these fights, and they always lose the fights to the Chinese, because the Chinese are actually that's the big thing. They're good at team fighting. They have been trained to do that ever since OMG. So,
I mean, we're going to see Hong Kong Attitude win Worlds, and then China claim it's a Chinese region team, so it counts as China still.
And
well,
Taiwan
I mean, they already did win once.
And Taiwan is actually not. And Taiwan is actually going to say, sorry, Taiwan is actually going to say, maybe we are. Maybe we actually are Chinese.
It's going to be like the Olympics all over again, where Taiwan has to compete in the World Championship as Chinese Taipei. Just to tilt them
God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, to be fair, they are actually called the Republic of China.
Yeah, I know. And they had their own separate flag and their own separate history.
I mean,
they actually used to. The crazy thing
Hong
is,
Kong is a former UK territory, so we get a lot of
the crazy
Hong Kong coming over here to study.
The craziest thing about Taiwan actually is
speak Cantonese.
They used to represent China at the UN for a long time after the People's Republic of China had taken over everything. So that was kind of funny.
It's because they didn't allow China to be a part of it until Nixon.
Yeah.
You're talking to the political science major over here.
Yeah. All right.
I mean, I'm gonna know all this.
Maybe we'll have a podcast on that sometime else. It was a pleasure to have you on, guys. And see you with the next one.